All right, so the biggest debate right now, not even just among Bulls fans, but across the NBA in general when it comes to this draft class, is surrounding the two future franchise-changing prospects, Caleb Wilson versus Cameron Boozer. Two elite forward prospects, two completely different styles of play. Both, of course, have their various strengths and weaknesses, and while we don't know who is ultimately going to be available by the time the Bulls are on the clock at number 4, I've said before, the decision for the Bulls is going to be easy. You take whoever is left among those top 4 prospects, but most believe it is going to be either Cam Boozer or Caleb Wilson, and depending on how the Bulls build this roster out moving forward, one of these players could end up being the better long-term fit in Chicago. So we're going to do our best in this video to settle this ongoing debate between who is the better prospect between these two, who is better for the Bulls, breaking down their college production, their NBA draft combine measurements, strengths and weaknesses, NBA comparisons, and ultimately who should rank higher on the Bulls board. Let's get into it. So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Now, of course, as we all know, the Bulls are still searching for that franchise cornerstone, someone who can elevate this team into consistent contention in the Eastern Conference. Yes, you could say Modest might eventually be that guy, and do I think Modest will be great as he continues to develop going into his prime? Yeah, absolutely, but if we're going to be honest, we can't say at this point in time that he's a franchise player and that this is the type of guy that is going to lead this team to contention. But given the Bulls, they got lucky and moved into the top 4, landing the number 4 pick, they will have an opportunity to potentially get a franchise-altering player. Now, when it comes to Caleb Wilson and Cam Boozer, I mean, you're talking about two players that are very different stylistically. Let's start with Caleb Wilson because I do believe he is going to be the guy that will be available at number 4. A lot of things can change between now and then. Player stocks rise and fall all the time as we get closer and closer to the draft, but I would say it's a 70% chance Caleb Wilson is going number 4. Now, Caleb Wilson is the modern NBA prototype. Explosive athlete, insane speed getting down the court, hops like you wouldn't believe with how high he can get up, defensive versatility, high upside two-way player, but at the same time, he's a bit more raw than, say, someone like Cam Boozer. Cam Boozer, on the other hand, is more polished, NBA ready, who isn't even 19 years old yet, elite feel for the game, especially for someone his age. Versatile scorer, he can score at all levels, whether it be in the post, getting to the basket and finishing at the rim, or playing off the ball in the catch and shoot with his three-point shooting. NBA ready IQ with his high-level passing and court vision, takes care of the ball. Most people argue he is the safest prospect in this class. You'll continue to hear people say Boozer has the higher floor while Wilson has the higher ceiling. And so to me, the debate basically comes down to upside versus polish. We know that both are going to be great players, but which one is more likely to have the longer standing successful career and fit with the Chicago Bulls? So let's break down Caleb Wilson a bit first. Wilson measured 6'9" and a quarter barefoot at the draft combine at 210 pounds with a 7-foot wingspan and a 9-foot standing reach. Not the type of measurements that necessarily blow you away, especially when you look at his weight for his size. He is slender, and it does make you wonder if he's going to have the strength and physicality to deal with NBA level power forwards, something that Modest has struggled with early on. But I mean, obviously Wilson's draft workouts, you can see he immediately stands out physically with his fluid movement and agility. He has the mobility to switch defensively across multiple positions while also being athletic enough to thrive in transition, which is rare to see for someone his size. Well, I guess it's maybe not that rare anymore, but having that type of skill set is extremely valuable in today's NBA. And honestly, when you watch him move and you watch the tape from his season last year at North Carolina, you see flashes of players like Jaren Jackson Jr., but a more explosive Jaren Jackson Jr. with greater leaping ability. I know some might say it's a stretch, but he even has shades of a leaner Giannis when playing in transition. The raw tools are really special, and it's why a lot of scouts believe he has such a high ceiling to become a star in this league with the right player development and improvement in some of the weaker areas of his game, like his shooting and off-ball defense. Now, when it comes to his production in college, Wilson's numbers don't always jump off the page at first glance when you're strictly looking at a box score or his season stats as a whole, but context matters. His impact shows up in his defensive versatility, rim protection, transition offense, hustle plays. I cannot tell you enough how much I appreciate guys who give the extra effort and fighting for loose balls. And while his three-point shot isn't really there, he is a strong offensive player, not only just around the basket when it comes to his ability to catch high lobs and put back shots off offensive rebounds, but he's got a solid post-up game where he can score in the mid-range at an efficient clip. In his 24 games in North Carolina, he averaged 19.8 points per game on 62% true shooting percentage, 9.4 rebounds, 1.4 blocks, and 1.5 steals. He's very efficient scoring around the basket, strong rebounding numbers, good transition efficiency, and knowing where he needs to be when his team is on a fast break. The other thing that people, like about Caleb Wilson is that he doesn't really need to be a high usage player to impact winning. He doesn't always need the ball in his hands. He makes plays by just doing strong cuts to the basket, fighting for offensive rebounds for second chance points, effective in the pick and roll as a lob threat. All of that is actually really important when it comes to the Bulls and their current roster, by the way, because one of the big debates right now among Bulls fans is whether they should be keeping Josh Giddey on this team long term, whether it makes sense to have a high usage guard who needs the ball in his hands to be effective instead of giving the keys to whoever this new prospect is going to be at number 4. Wilson doesn't need the ball in his hands. He can create for himself if given the opportunity, very similar to Modest in that regard. So when it comes to Wilson's strengths, it's the defensive ceiling that he has, the defensive versatility to be able to switch onto guards, defend the perimeter while also protecting the rim and recovering with his length even if he gets beat off the dribble. In today's NBA, defensive versatility is such an important trait for frontcourt players. And then as far as his strengths on offense, he's devastating in the open floor. He can grab a rebound and go coast to coast in the blink of an eye. He can run lanes, create pressure instantly for opponents, and look, we all know the Bulls desperately need more athleticism and speed. And then of course, what if he develops that jumper? Arguably the biggest hole in his game is his jump shot. If he can somehow get a jump shot, even if it's slightly above average where he's able to knock down threes at a decent clip, say around 35-36%, now we're talking about a possible superstar level two-way player with everything else that he can do. Now, when it comes to Wilson's weaknesses, he's not great when it comes to creating in the half court, doesn't have the best court vision and passing ability to initiate offense when it's not in transition. He struggles in tight handle situations, similar to Modest. Again, the shooting is a problem that has to improve. And then I would also say that at times his off-ball defense hasn't been the best. A lot of miscues on backdoor cuts, missed assignments, gets a little too focused watching the ball. But again, you hope that stuff will come with time when you're talking about a 19-year-old player. And then of course, he's going to need to add muscle. He's got to be able to match the size and level of physicality he's going to see in the NBA from what he saw at the collegiate level. Now, let's compare all this to Cam Boozer. Boozer's measurements at the combine were impressive. 6'8" barefoot, but a beast at 252 pounds. Strong NBA-ready frame, excellent functional strength. Unlike Wilson, Boozer already looks physically prepared for the NBA, and he's even younger as he won't turn 19 until this summer. And then when you look at his production at the collegiate level in his time at Duke, I mean, man, I know some call him the boring prospect because he's not as explosive and athletic as some of the other guys, but he gets it done. He impacts winning, and I would argue more than any of the other 4, his production, his consistency has been elite in every facet: scoring, rebounding, passing, very efficient on offense at all 3 levels, high level decision maker, rarely makes mistakes. Cam averaged 22.5 points per game, 10.2 rebounds, 4.1 assists, 1.4 steals, and shot 39% from 3 on decent volume, I might add. He shot an insane 66% true shooting percentage over his 38 games at Duke. Insanely efficient, and he does so without all the flash. What stands out to me most about Boozer is the consistency. He's been a winning player at every level. He's always available and doesn't miss games, which Wilson has already had a fair share of injuries at the early stages of his career, which is somewhat concerning. He already understands when to make the right plays, the right reads, when to push in transition, when to operate more on the half court, great shot selection, good handles. His footwork is great touch around the basket, and his passing is advanced for someone his size. All of this extremely impressive for someone his age. Now, we've talked about how Boozer has the higher floor while Wilson has the higher ceiling. Boozer is a floor raiser. Some prospects are big-time ceiling bets on the part of scouts. That's not Boozer, although I would argue he still has a very high ceiling. You can plug him into any NBA rotation immediately and get production and winning impact. For a Bulls team that lacks identity and consistency, that has real value for the Bulls, a team that is looking to build their foundation for the future. You'd have to think Boozer's biggest separator, really among all the prospects in this draft, is his IQ. He processes the game at an elite level, and let's be honest, that often determines who succeeds long-term in the NBA. Yes, athleticism matters at the professional level, but high IQ, elite feel for the game matters just as much. Of course, his weaknesses, there aren't that many really outside of him just not really being the most athletic. Compared to Wilson especially, Boozer simply doesn't have the same explosiveness and the physical tools that Wilson does. He's a good athlete, not an elite one, and because of that, that could slightly cap his defensive versatility at the NBA level. Now, when it comes to who fits the Bulls better, this is where things get interesting. I think it all depends on how the Bulls plan to flesh out the roster going forward, because depending on who they land between these two, it's going to determine how they construct this rebuild going forward. Like if the Bulls are swinging for superstar upside, you could argue Caleb Wilson makes more sense. If they want to maintain what their offensive identity was last season of a high-paced team that is going to live above the rim, yeah, Wilson is going to fit that to a T. He's going to be that slap guy that Bryson Graham is looking for. But if the Bulls want a player who can stabilize the franchise quickly and become a foundational offensive piece, a more sure thing, if you will, Cam Boozer is probably the better choice. Now for me, if I had to choose between the two, not that the Bulls are going to have to choose, they're likely just going to take whatever one is available at number 4, like I mentioned before, but let's say they traded up to number 3, and you had to choose, I'd slightly lean Boozer, not because he's the quote-unquote safe bet, but I just feel like his combination of skills, history, being an impact player that wins at all levels, the IQ, production, NBA readiness, all of it. That's why if I had to choose, it would be a slight nod to Boozer. But honestly, what I love about having this debate, these discussions, is the fact that both of these guys are going to be great. The Bulls are going to get a great prospect regardless, and it feels nice to even be having these discussions rather than debating something like who's the better upside player between Noah Senge and Derek Queen. So I really don't think there is necessarily a wrong answer here as far as who the better option between Boozer and Wilson is. I'm going to be happy with either one, but I want to hear from you guys what you think. Who do you think is the better prospect? Let me know in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.